Good evening. Welcome to the committee as a whole meeting of November 15th, 2021. We're going to be here to discuss the re-precincting maps. Mr. Cantor, roll call.
Roll call of the members. Councilor Janino?
Here.
Here. Councilor Guanasso is absent. Councilor Keefe?
Here.
Here. Councilor McKenna is absent. Councilor Morabito?
Here.
Here. Councilor Novoselsky? Here. Councilor Powers is absent. Councilor Rotundo is absent. Councilor Sereno is absent. Councilor Visconti?
Here.
Here. And Council President Sambudo?
Here.
Here. Quorum is present.
Mr. Cantor.
Thank you, Mr. President. With your permission, I have a little presentation. I'm going to try to run through it. I know that most of you all want to share your thoughts with me, but I just wanted to go through a little bit of what we have here. So thank you.
Right ahead.
So if we can share the screen, thank you. So we've been at work at this for a while. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge two people in the room with us. First is Kay Cook, who is an attorney at, I'm never going to get this right, Sugarman, Rogers, Barshek, and Cohen, who has helped provide a lot of legal guidance for us in terms of this process and ensuring that we met the legal requirements for the U.S. Census and the state, the Secretary of State. But I also, in particular, really wanted to acknowledge James Clue, who is here from CDM Smith, and he's really the one who did all the hard work. I'm here talking, but he is the one who's done all the mapping work and has been just tremendous value for us.
So we can blame him with anything.
You can blame him if you're unhappy.
Okay.
Blame me if you're unhappy.
I just
credit him if you're happy.
Just wanted
That's
to
how I
check.
would do this, right? All right. So quickly going through the process. I'm sure that you all know every 10 years we redraw the maps after we get the new census data. And we had four key goals when we went through this process. First of all, our legal requirements was to ensure that we were balancing the population numbers in every ward and precinct based on the new data of the sizes of the new wards and precincts. And we had to make sure that the communities of interest were neither packed nor fragmented in voting districts. That is a legal requirement that the U.S. government is paying close attention to. And then we also wanted to ensure that we were listening to both resident and elected official feedback. We've definitely talked to a number of city councilors and heard some feedback from residents, and we'll share a little bit of that. And we were also looking at some geographic consistency, just taking another look at some of the maps and seeing if there are areas or ways that we could make the geographies of the city in the wards and precincts and the voting areas a little bit more consistent. Without going through all the details of our calendar, really we've been at this for 2 years. If you go back to 2 years ago, and we did the Revere counts and all the incredible work of that program, which is has a lot to do with the new population data that we have. We had our first public hearing on the redrawing Revere process back in May. We had an additional public hearing in September. In addition, we published maps in September, 6 different draft maps prior to receiving the legislative maps. And we did that to get community feedback and get a sense of where people were in their process of thinking about the Revere maps. And I'll show you some of the data and some of the comments from all of that. And then, of course, these 2 hearings that we're going to do today and Thursday. The final maps must be approved by the state by December 15th, which means we have to get them. The Secretary of State's office has already told us they wished we'd given to them sooner, but that was really not possible in any possible way. So we're going to do our best to get these maps to their hands as quickly as possible so that we can make sure that they have ability to approve our maps by the deadline of December 15th. So just looking at the data, I think we've had a fair amount of discussion about the fact that the population of Revere has grown by 20% since 2010. The average ward size would grow from 8,600 from the 2010 data to 10,364 residents per ward in the new configuration. And looking ward by ward, you can see that Ward 2 had the biggest increase of 31% and has to come down in size, while Wards 1 and 6, mostly 6, had the slowest increase in population, and they actually have to increase a little bit in size in order to meet the mandated amount. And I guess what I didn't say before is the legal requirement is for every ward to be within 5% of the deviation of the average. Our goal was to try to get a little less than that, more like 2 to 3%, to try to get things as even as possible across all wards. The population share from 2010 and 2020, looking at the demographics of the city and how they have shifted, it's been a pretty remarkable shift. Most notably, the non-Hispanic white population has gone from 62% of the total population in 2010 to 45% in 2020, and the Latino population went from 24% to 37%. And the other demographic groups, they actually grew in size in order to maintain that percentage share, and that two or more races, non-Hispanic, that is a trend we've seen across the country, that sudden jump. So I think people have been self-identifying more frequently as two or more races, and I'm sure many researchers will dig into the logic and the reasons behind that, but we did not do that in this particular process. I don't think it makes sense for me to read all this census feedback. You have it here on your sheets, but I think I wanted to share a lot of it because we had a fair amount of feedback here about specifically wards 3 and 5 that connected, I think, directly to our proposal to flip 3-3 and 5-3 in terms of people north of Revere Street asking why they would be in Ward 3 and not in Ward 5. People on the southern edges of Ward 5 wondering why they wouldn't be included with Beachmont, which wasn't quite feasible, but it made more sense to put them into Ward 3. So I think we took a lot of this feedback into consideration in our proposal, and certainly want to hear what you guys have to say, men and women have to say about that as well. And that last comment I think is really important just because about Oakwood Ave. There were a number of people who asked us about, why am I on my side of the street in one ward and someone on the other side of the street in another ward? And unfortunately, because of the way the wards have to be drawn, they have to be drawn with census blocks. And census blocks are drawn in a geography that are within, that are separated by streets. You can't go through someone's backyard. That is not legal to do that, to separate one ward from another. We did our best to focus on natural boundaries, so like Broadway or railways or parks or water, and any of those types of things were really good ways to find natural boundaries, but not every boundary could be defined by natural boundaries. And so there were, as I'm sure you'll see, there are some places that we just couldn't avoid those kinds of splits. They're just unfortunately not possible to avoid that. So, and I'm happy to hear your feedback on any specific areas that you're seeing. So after the census, we put out 6 different maps that we drafted just to get feedback from residents. And we had 147 responses to our survey, which was pretty remarkable. And you can see the results of the survey. In the end, none of these 6 maps that we put forward are actually feasible with the new boundaries drawn by the legislature. It makes it not quite possible to do any of the 6 of them, but it was really good to get the feedback and hear where people were. And you can see by far the highest vote getter was a map that we drew that created a Latino supermajority. And you can kind of see in the corner there, sort of snaked Ward 2 a little bit into Ward 1 in order to create that. And I don't think any of us who drew that map loved the way that map looked, and that map is just not actually possible under the current situation. And quickly, just, you can see some of the feedback we received when we put those maps up. Again, a lot of motivation around map 5 and some of the other comments that you see there. So now I thought we would get into the maps. I'm sure you all, as city councilors, you're very well aware of the current ward boundaries, but I just wanted to put this in for the record as well. You can see the new legislative districts, the 16th and the 19th Suffolk district. Just in case anyone is not clear, on the 16th Suffolk, the Revere portion is everything below the orange line. North of that is Saugus, and in the 19th Suffolk, Revere is everything north of the orange line. Everything below that is Winthrop. So as we get into the proposed ward, and I apologize, I am going fast, so if you want me to slow down, you can let me know, but I'm just going to keep going until I hear otherwise. The proposed ward and precinct maps, just to pay attention to the gray boundaries or the current boundaries. We tried to show the current boundaries within the map so you can sort of compare and contrast those. The dotted and darker lines, are the precincts. And the orange line, which runs kind of between Ward 5 and 3, as well as between 2 and 3 and 2 and 1, that is all part of the legislative boundary between the 16th and 19th Suffolk. So that's a lot of information we tried to put in a single map. Hopefully that's not too confusing. So Ward 1, we'll just go ward by ward and so show some of the key changes. I think the biggest change in Ward 1 and Ward 2 is this section here by the Garfield, which we worked with Councilor Novoselsky. I know he's not happy. We tried to find all kinds of ways that we could reunite this section around the Garfield, because of course it makes little logical sense to say, you know, the people who are living around the Garfield are now going to be asked to vote at the Beachmont, which is, those are the stars where the voting locations are. And I think that we, you know, all of us agree that that makes no sense, and yet because of the way the boundaries were drawn by the legislature, we are completely hemmed in and really don't have a lot of options. And I'm happy to share some of those details and, you know, hear your thoughts on how we could do it differently. And really the only way that we can come up with would be to create new sub-precincts in new locations. And you know, we definitely heard from the election commissioner that new sub-precincts were going to be serious problems. And we have a copy of the map up here if you want to look in there. And I brought a pen so we can draw on it and erase it and whatever we want to do to try to figure out if there are other ways that we can do that for Ward 1 and Ward 2. And I just wanted to point out again, the orange boundary is the legislative district. So Ward 2, again, the same problem that we just brought up. We made some minor adjustments within some of the precincts just to make sure that we had the numbers fairly even, but not a lot of changes. I believe, James, we changed a little bit between 2.2 and 2.3a, if I'm not mistaken. 2.3 stayed exactly the same because that is now included in the, I'm getting them confused, in the 19th Suffolk District. The other thing I just wanted to note in Ward 2 that I think is really kind of important is the block around Wonderland has nearly 1,800 people in it. That's a single census block that cannot be split up. That block had, I believe it was about 800 people in it in 2010. So that one block that in the infinite wisdom of the US government, they put all those people in a single block. That's more than half of a precinct in a single map block that cannot be split up in any way according to the current geographies. And that was something that we talked a lot about and wanted to do something else with, but really, you know, again, we're pretty hemmed in on what we could do with that. Ward 3, so obviously the biggest shift, as I think I mentioned last week, is the shift between 3.3 and 5.3 and flipping those two precincts. And part of the logic, in addition to the testimony we got, is actually also maintaining them within the legislative boundaries so that all of Ward 3 is in the 19th and all of Ward 5 is in the 16th. Sorry, did I get those wrong? Sorry, I get them confused in my head. Thanks. Sorry, all of Ward 3 is in the 16th, and all of Ward 5 is in the 19th. Thank you. I'm sure I will get that wrong again, but correct me. All right. Just a couple of other minor things. You can see Ward 3 shifted slightly here in the southwest corner, and I want to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about Ward 4, and I'll do that next. And then Ward 3 lost a little bit of territory here in the northern part to Ward 6, which, as I mentioned, had to grow to meet the legally mandated sizes. Ward 4, so the biggest, again, this change here, we did hear feedback about people wanting to maintain those or try to reunite lines, and we were unable to do that as much as we would have liked. But we did work with Councilor Keefe on some of those boundaries to create a little bit more logic there. And, you know, we talked a lot about this section to the west of Route 1 and wanting to move that because it looks so strange to have that little section west of Ward 1 and Ward 6 rather than in Ward 4. But the councilor made the reasonable point that the interests of the people west of Route 1 are actually more aligned and should be kept together. And it made more sense to do that. So we actually ended up keeping them together in Ward 6. And then, as I mentioned a minute ago about Ward 3, this little section on the eastern side, we shifted to Ward 3 in part because we wanted to create the natural boundary of Broadway. We thought that it made a lot more sense to keep all of Ward 4 to the west of Broadway rather than having this little section that sort of creeped across it. That would be much more consistent and a lot easier for voters to see that there's a clear boundary on Broadway. There's not a lot to say about Ward 5, other than, again, the switch between 5-3 and 3-3. Pretty much other than that, we were completely, as I said before, kind of hemmed in by the legislative boundaries and didn't have a lot of room to sort of manipulate the size of the ward in any meaningful way. And that's the boundary there, the congressional boundary, the legislative boundary between the 19th and the 16th. So quickly, you can see the difference between the existing 3-3 and 3-5 and the proposed 3-3 and 3-5. You can see that in the existing Ward 5, it snakes down almost the entire length of Revere from Point of Pines all the way to that southern area. I did a Google Map traffic trip test of that area, search, and in rush hour, it was 35 minutes from one side of Ward 5 to the other. In the proposed Ward 3, Ward 5, in that same time period, it was about 12 minutes. So we actually are reducing the travel time to get from one side of the ward to the other through this particular proposal. And as mentioned, maintaining the legislative boundaries as well as hearing some of the interests, the combined interests of the folks around Revere Street. And last, I apologize, in your maps, I think Ward 6 got cut off a little bit, but you could see that the Ward 6 really hasn't changed very much other than this little section that it had to grow out on the eastern part in order to get to the proper geographies. And so you probably can't see this very well on the screen, or at least I know I can't, but because it's a little small, but you can see the ward data, the deviations, are all pretty close to 2% from the average based on the work that James did to get these maps put in place. Some of the key testimony and things we heard were from particularly the Latino community wanting to know sort of where their votes were going to be, and there is a majority Latino population in Ward 2 still. And the total communities of color, the non-Hispanic white population, there are 4 wards that are majority people of color, and this is just sort of the happenstance of how the maps worked out, but we have 4 wards that are also majority people of color of voting age. And this was modeled in part after the work that the legislature did when they created the opportunity districts. The legislature was trying to match the majority people of color districts to the population of the state, and we were trying to do the same here in Revere and kind of have wards that match that. But in the end, we didn't even really try to create these numbers. These are the numbers that actually were created based on the boundaries that were provided to us most logically. That is the end of my presentation, and I'm sure you all have many things that you want to say.
Councilor Janino.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to Ruben. First of all, thank you for taking the time. I know you've put an extensive amount of work into this, and this has been no easy undertaking by any means.
Thank you.
I just want to say this has been quite an interesting process to be a part of, to be able to see it through the lens of the state and the city. And this is the first time for me. And it's very interesting to see how the state's process works and how they come through and decide, you know, what has to shift, what has to move based on a number of different factors. And they have pretty amazing software that I've seen that kind of plugs it in all and moves it around, which is great. But in terms of what the cities came up with, I think you guys, you know, worked with what you had and did a really great job to make it work. It's also nice, you know, from my perspective, to see some of the wards fit more cohesively in the district, like Ward 3 and Ward 5, and not having that division. So if basically, you know, you live in Ward 5, you know, as of 2022, you know, who your representative is, and the same for Ward 3 versus, oh, are you on this street? Well, if you're on this half of the street, you call me. If you're on this half of the street, call them. And that can be confusing. And I think that this map does a great job at cleaning up some of those areas and neighborhoods that were broken up. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Novoselsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ruben, ladies and gentlemen, as you mentioned, I am not happy. First of all, I do want to say that I want to welcome Councilor and Representative Janino to Ward 2. That's one of the few wards that actually has 2 state reps.
That's right.
So, we'll have a little more flexibility and hopefully a little more power and cooperation amongst everybody. There you go. So that's number one. Number two, I am concerned about that small precinct of 23A.
As are we.
It shows that there's only 762 people that were accounted for in that little block, that precinct. I'm concerned that we have to establish, and that doesn't mean that the 762 voters. That's going to mean there's going to be a lot less voters.
That's correct.
And that means that we have to establish a precinct for a very, very, very small number of voters in that neighborhood. And the city's spending money to do another precinct. And I would think that that precinct should be either broken up and combined into some of the other 2 precincts that are there, so we don't have to establish a 4th precinct in Ward 2.
Are you looking for me to respond to that?
Sure, go ahead.
We agree. I think that the election commissioner wrote a letter to the chair of the redistricting commission for the legislature and noted this issue. What I am told is that there are election commissioners across the state where this has happened in various forms, where the boundaries were created because they switched the process this year. More boundaries were created that created these sub precincts than in the past. In the past, what has happened is cities and towns do the precinct process first, and then the legislature builds their precincts after that. But in this particular case, because of the date that the census data was received, it was not possible. The legislature had to switch the calendar. Otherwise, people would be basically constitutionally undistricted. And so they had to get those districts in place by last week in order for a legislator to be able to run for office. They have to live in their district for a year. So we kind of got stuck with that in part because of COVID, because of the date that the census data arrived, and then because the legislature had to do what they did and what we knew they were going to do. And so, yeah, I don't think that any of us disagree. I think between the current election commissioner and the next election commissioner, I think we should work on some strategies. Hopefully, we'll find some ways to put those folks 2-3 and 2-3A to vote in the same location, even if they have to be voting in 2 different elections. That should make it a little bit easier. But I don't think any of us disagree with your point on that.
Then why don't we do it? Why don't we find a way to make it happen?
We were preparing to do so until we were hemmed in. And that's no fault of ours, it's no fault of anyone in this room. It's just how it played out. And, we did send a note to the legislature asking them to reconsider that, but they didn't do so.
We'll be lucky to have 100 votes out of that precinct. And now we're paying people and additional election equipment for 100 votes.
If you have a solution, I'm willing to listen to it. I don't have a solution.
You guys are the pros.
And as the pro, I'm telling you that there's no solution to that right now.
There has to be. There has to be.
And I don't think I'm a pro. But
That's my number one
Okay.
issue. Number two, we talked about a block on Waverly Ave and North Shore Road and Centennial Ave that shows 67 people there. Now, the way you explain it to me, it's that little block that just shows 67 people. Excuse me, and nothing against the owner of the property, but this is Atlas Auto Body, which is an auto body shop, and you don't have 67 people living in that building. It's a single building in one little block. So I'm blaming the people that collected the census actually for cheating and finding ways to make people in my neighborhood to live in that block. And honestly, I would ask for a federal investigation on that, because that's ridiculous that that is showing 67 people in that building. It's impossible. And you, in the committee, should go back and check that, because it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. You know, the people that were working down in my neighborhood doing it, they just picked names out of anywhere just to put in there, no matter who lived there, if they could even live there. And this is a good example, 67 potential people that don't live there. And it's wrong, and that should be investigated. And the other one is, I'm not making a big thing of it, but honestly, I think it's stupid and ridiculous that they put a section of Revere Beach into Ward 2. I want to know who they're counting, the Plovers? It shows 0 people, and it doesn't mean anything. It was always in Ward 1. It doesn't mean a thing. And you're saying, oh, because of what, it goes out into the water in a different shape. Big deal.
We can put that back.
Big deal.
We can switch
You know,
that over.
It actually shows stupid that 0 people live in that block of the beach. There's the Plovers and the rocks. That's all you got there. It was there before. Put it back. Let it look decent. I didn't hear you, Counsel, I'm sorry. But, you know, and the question is, you know, where are people going to vote? The Garfield schools, you know, and I just spent $1 million between, actually over $1 million, between the Garfield school itself, Curtis Park, and a new playground down there. And God bless that Joanne's going to, you know, Councilor McKenna's going to get it, you know, she's going to enjoy it, and the kids are going to enjoy it. But, you know, here you are taking that out of my precinct and my ward. And I worked hard on that. And, you know, I think if those 67 people are corrected, we'll be able to get 67 people behind the Garfield School and have that natural boundary of Elliott Road come into play.
Unfortunately, the problem with the Garfield School census block is that I think it's 248 people in that single block that winds down and is very, again, illogically drawn. The federal government, in their wisdom, created this census block that we agree doesn't make sense, but we are confined in what we can do. In terms of how we handle that. And because there's an additional block of 71 that surrounds it, we actually are impacted by 320 voters total, which would, if we moved that entire area back to Ward 2, would take Ward 2 to 6% deviation and outside the legal limit and would never be approved by the Secretary of State.
Yeah, well, you know, this is a perfect example of gerrymandering as far as I'm concerned. It's ridiculous that it's made for certain people. You know, listen, my ward is, you know, is very diverse, and you're showing 50% Hispanic in my neighborhood. You know, and that's the majority right now. And, you know, but not 50% vote, and I understand that. But it's just the idea that, you know, that one block, believe it or not, bothers me. That's 67 people.
It bothers me too.
Then why don't we do something about it and double check it?
That is not something we have the ability to do. We do not have the
Well,
ability to go.
we contact the census, the people in the census, and tell them they're wrong.
We do have the ability to request review processes, but the time frame is such that you're going to get this into the works of the federal government, and they have to approve and do a million things, and it'll never occur in time for
Well,
the
here's-
So,
pre-printing process.
excuse me, may I speak? for a second?
Council
So-
Vice President.
I'm sorry.
Visconti.
So do we is there a time frame that we have to abide by? Because of, it's taken so long, why don't we double check this? I mean, why do we have to slam it through, is my question.
So I hope we're not slamming it through. I apologize if it
I
looks
mean,
that way.
obviously, when you say that we're, you know, we have some time constraints, that's a problem,
So
right?
the Secretary of State's office is requiring that all maps be approved by December 15th. So from right now, we have about 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks to do this. But I don't think that there's any realistic way that the federal government is going to change the census data, because we haven't seen them change the census data anywhere else. There's no realistic way that the U.S. government is going to change the census data in the next 3 weeks in time for us to approve a map. It's just not, it's not, I hope I'm expressing that I am frustrated too. and that I wish there was a way out of this, but I don't actually have one. The only way that I know of out of this would be to create a special sub-precinct or several sub-precincts to make cost more and create more complications. Those are the only solutions, and I don't think anyone wants more sub-precincts.
And in some cases, we did not want to specifically carve up your ward, but it grew so much compared to the rest of the city that it had to lose population. And so when you look at the lines that the state gave us for the districts, you're basically entirely hemmed in on the western side of your district. Or you're gonna create more sub-precincts, as he said, that's gonna cause an administrative nightmare. You have this humongous block on Ocean Ave with all the new condos that in itself is a gigantic boondoggle to try to shift, because it by itself is half a precinct worth of people, more. And then basically what that leaves is this entire area is kind of a C shape. We can't do anything, and the only area was left was that southeast area. It wasn't like we chose to do it or wanted to do it or did anything. It was literally the only recourse for most of it. So.
Before I go back to Council Novoselsky, I'm very concerned that 67 people are living in a body shop. Now, I mean, this kind of stuff, excuse my almost language, can't stand. And I know there's census and all this, but if the census data was wrong, it's got to be corrected. And I don't care how it's corrected, but there are not 67 people living in that body shop. Now, if that's an example of this census and how it was done, God help us. This is ridiculous. So I don't know what the remedy to that is, but if that's one example, I'm horrified. That's all I can say.
I think that's
Councilor
fair.
Novoselsky.
I don't know what the remedy is, because I haven't looked into the legal, and I have not looked into the legal issue of the 67 people living there. But yeah, I think we should discuss that. I think we should figure out if there's something that we
All
can.
I know is a lot of people got a lot of praise for doing such a wonderful job on this census. And my first view of it is that there's a real problem here. And maybe those compliments should have been held back a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, you know, that's one of the key issues. And now, what did the election commission say about the people voting in Ward 2, that vote in Ward 2, wherever they go? The only location that's for Ward 2 now is Hyman Towers, 50 Walnut Ave.
So-
You can't have all precincts going to Walnut Ave.
I think we agree. So the election commissioner and I did have a brief discussion, and I'm not, off the top of my head, I'm not remembering exactly what we decided, but it is, first of all, it is legally still possible to have people who don't live in Ward 1 vote in Ward 1. If we still want the people who live in 2-1 to vote at the Garfield, we can still do that. There's no legal reason we cannot do that. However, if you think that it would be easier to find another location, I think between you and the election commissioner, the new and the existing election commissioner, we can come up with other solutions. I believe that we had located a church that might have, I don't remember. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, so maybe I'm crazy. I thought that we
Church in
had.
Ward 2?
Maybe not.
Excuse me?
I don't remember, I'm sorry.
No.
But this was a conversation that I think we expected to have once we got the maps approved, that we wanted you to be a part of the process and figure out the best way to do this. And certainly, like I said, Garfield can still be a voting location for 2-1.
Which I would prefer.
Okay.
I would prefer that. I know, you know, and I know the law and that you can do something adjacent, you know, in the precinct, but
that
you know,
does still
the
work.
2-1 people should be going there, and all the 2-2 and 2-3 and 2-3A people, unfortunately, going to have to go to 2-2.
Well, the 2-3 and 2-3,
To
right,
Walnut Ave.
2-3, 2-3A people could vote at Hyman Tower still.
Yeah, which is, you know, it's going to be difficult as it is. And, you know, unless we make another sub-precinct to go to the Garfield, part of 2A, the 2-2A, and go send some of those Ocean Ave people
Yeah.
to Garfield.
I think we want to be a part of the solution with you. I think that we have to figure out the best way, and I think, across the whole city, we should make sure, because I know that the election commissioner consolidated a lot of the precincts due to COVID, and we should decide if that continues to make sense, or if it's something that we should revisit. So I think once this election, this process is not for the special. Whatever we're doing here today is for the September, November election for 2022. So we have some time where we should have those conversations with all of you around whether the existing precinct locations continue to make the most sense.
Now that this has been shoved down our throat, and once again, and again, I know the legislature works hard at it, but, here they are, not taking the city and towns into consideration like they do when they do unfunded mandates. And they shove everything down our throats, and this is what's being shoved down our throat. Now, when do people start calling Councilor McKenna compared to calling me? After January 1st, or is it in 2 years?
When will they start? So
Yeah.
you will continue to be the city councilor for the same areas that you are currently the city councilor for. So that
Okay.
will continue for the next 2 years.
2 years.
So the new shift for the new wards and precincts won't take place until 2023 election. So that will not change. But I do think that, and I've talked with Diane Colella and the mayor's office and others, we're going to want to work with all of you on putting together, a really comprehensive communications plan across the city to make sure that everyone is aware of the new locations, of how this is going down, of any changes that have been made, or anyone who's staying exactly the same. So those are things that we're planning on doing.
Yeah, I know it has not, not you, it's more election, but, going from COVID voting down in Beachmont, I mean, everybody at the Garfield School, last year and the year before, to the split back to where we were before. We had at least 50 people show up at the Garfield School that didn't vote there. Now, allegedly, they got cards saying the new place. They claim they never got them. So, that's upsetting too, that all these people had to go from their homes to the Garfield and then be shipped up to 50 Walnut Avenue.
I think it's upsetting to all of us.
We're going to have to wrap
Out
up
of
quick.
control. So,
We got 2 meetings we got to
honestly,
get in.
I will not vote for this, no matter what. No matter
Okay,
what anybody says. Thank you.
Councilor Sereno, quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the leeway. Through you to Mr. Cantor, what would happen if we wait, for Councilor Novoselsky's request to get the data straightened out with regard to the auto body shop? And what happens if, as a council, we vote this map down? What are the consequences, and what does that look like?
So I don't know. I have not ever done an examination of how to create the accusation that there could be fraudulent individuals who answered the census fraudulently. I mean, that's a federal crime. So I don't even know where to begin with that, and what to do with that information. The idea that we could solve this potential federal crime in the next 3 weeks seems unrealistic. And I'm not saying that because I want to have you do the thing I want you to do. I'm just saying I don't think that it's realistic to expect that we can solve this.
We've got another meeting Thursday, and we'll take up some of this stuff, but, at this point, I'm not a happy camper, and if there's fraudulent stuff going on in the census, I don't care if we blow the whole thing up. I don't care if we cause a federal calamity. But when you got 67 people living in a body shop, I can't tolerate that. And if it means that we got a default or whatever it is, this council has to vote it down, we'll vote it down. So, I want answers to how the hell this happened.
The way that, if I'm not mistaken, Kate, if the council does not approve the map by the deadline, does the Secretary of State supersede and come in and create their own map? How does that process work? Just so that we have the information. I don't know.
I think that's right. The deadlines are set by statute, so no one's trying to ram anything down your throats. This is written in the general laws. This happens every 10 years. And respectfully, I would like to add these numbers were provided to us and to the city, as we all know, in August of 2021. This is the first we've ever heard about concerns about a criminal fraudulent representation in the census
Well, it's the
numbers.
first-
So this is shocking. Tomorrow, I will get on the phone.
Okay, 'cause it's the first I've heard
I will talk to the Secretary
it.
of State's office, and we'll do
Okay.
what we can. But
I
these are
mean-
very serious allegations, and if folks are serious,
Yeah.
we can find out what can be done. But this is not something the city
Okay.
created.
No, I understand.
This is information
I understand,
that was
except-
gathered by the United States Commerce
Except this came
Secretary.
before us tonight, and we're told
Understood.
that there's 67 people living in a body shop.
It's the first I've heard about it.
So
I'm not
that-
sure if it's true.
It's-
So I'm
it's
not
not-
even, I'm not conceding at this point, Mr.
Right.
President, that that's even true. We're
Okay.
happy to look into it. I've never heard such a thing.
All
No
right.
one's ever brought it to our attention in the 5 months. The numbers have been before the city and the city council respectfully, so this is all very new to us.
What concerns me is if there's 67 people
Or not 67 people.
allegedly living in a body shop, I want to know what the heck else is out there.
Well-
We're the other miss,
Understood. I
Appropriation
hear
fee.
you loud and
Okay,
clear.
good.
But I will say, all 365 municipalities in the Commonwealth
Mm-hmm.
are going through this process. Many have already approved their maps.
Yeah.
And as the representative city council already pointed out, the legislature similarly has approved their maps. This is a process, and everyone is
I-
relying on the same
Right.
census information, which
Right.
now you are
Well-
alleging is highly problematic. So
until
I've
I'm
got
convinced-
alarm bells going off, but I'm not conceding at this point that anything
I know you're
improper has
not, but I'm
happened.
also I'm not conceding that what I heard here tonight isn't true. And I want evidence of what's true. I want to know what's true here. And if these numbers were fudged for whatever reason, to build a population in the ward, I'm not accusing anybody of what
Understood.
what was
As
done
Mr.
here.
Cantor
But I
pointed
was
out-
told tonight that 67 people are living in a body shop.
I heard that
That's enough.
too.
That's enough for me to want to
But as
blow
I
this
want
up.
to tell you, these aren't numbers that were created by the precinct
I understand
committee
that.
or the city. These are numbers that were provided to us by the United States Commerce Secretary and the federal government. So this is all very new. We're not in charge of the information.
Okay.
We're simply trying to help the city council do its job to approve the maps under its statutory requirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good, you got 1 minute, because we got 2 meetings we got to go on. And there'll be another public hearing on this Thursday night,
Right, I understand.
right after him.
So one comment and one question. I guess the comment is, I know for a fact there isn't 67 people living at Atlas Auto Body. I can attest to that, having been in there in the past 6 months. But that said, for the city of Revere, if it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it the city that employs people to go out and take the census? Is that the process? How is this number, these people recorded? That's, who set up that process?
Well, I believe the city contracted with a number of local entities, as many cities.
Can we get the names of every person that actually did the census and find out who collected that information?
I don't know, but I
Well,
will
it's a
find out.
public record, right?
I don't know, but I will find out.
That's a public record, correct?
I don't know, but I will find out.
Mr. President, I defer to you. We have Solicitor Capizzi here. I'd like to ask him a question, if this is not public record or not. We are paying a public contractor to do a job
Mr.
in which
Solicitor,
we
do
have
you want to answer
67
this
people
question?
accounted for at Atlas Auto Body.
I'll give my stock public records answer. Everything is a public record.
Say that again,
unless
please,
it
because
becomes
I don't believe the
exclusion.
camera's got you.
I don't want, man. Everything is a public record.
So this would be a
unless it
public
falls
record,
within
correct?
an I don't know what it is we're talking about.
The
Quite frankly, I just walked in the
You're
room
sitting
5
right
minutes
here,
ago.
so I'll refresh your memory. The contractor, or the people that we contracted, that we hired as a city to collect the census, that is public information because we're paying for it, correct?
What is public information? We have a written
No, no,
contract?
no.
We
Time
have a
out.
name and
Let me try to
I'm-
clarify this. Hold on. Hold on. Paul, here's the scenario here. He's trying to find out who collected the census, which the city hired these people.
Anybody who's been in government
So that's
knows the
public
answer.
record,
Yeah,
obviously.
Generally, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Counselor Janino.
Briefly, Mr. President, thank you for the leeway. I know I already spoke, but when I spoke, I had no idea about this allegation. I voted on the maps at the state level, and this was never brought to my attention as a state representative. I'm not going to speak for Rep. Turco, but I'm pretty sure if he knew about it, he would have brought it up to me as well, and there would have been a conversation. So it's alarming that if there is an issue, that it was never brought up to me when this came before the state. Problem number one. Problem number two, what concerns me about this is Revere had the #1 growth according to our census data in the Commonwealth. Not number two, not number three, we were #1 in the entire state of Massachusetts. So if we have the potential of an issue that we're drawing attention to, a possibility of a fraudulent amount of 60 some odd people, that's incredibly concerning for the entire city, because this is one building we've identified that could be incredibly problematic, and it's incredibly alarming. And to be quite frank with you, I'm uncomfortable at the fact that this is a conversation that we're having now when the state's already done. And if this was an issue, I don't understand how, as you know, they mentioned we've had these numbers since August, how this has never came up in conversation, and what happened between last week and today that this is becoming an issue. Because this is not a light problem, this is a big problem.
It is a very big problem, and I was always suspicious of 20% growth. Now, state that for
Mr.
the
President,
record.
I'm sorry to ask for this, but I think this, level of issue, because it incurs both federal and state dollars by the transformation of our population, requires an audit. I would seriously request a state audit. That's just my opinion.
We're gonna have another meeting on this this Thursday. We're all very concerned about what we heard here tonight, and we're gonna try to get to the bottom of it. And I don't know what it's gonna take, but these are serious allegations. And as the counselor to my right said, and representative said, this is shocking. And if even this little amount is true, it's enough.
Mr. President, I know you want to go on to the next meeting, but
Yeah.
just the last comment for me.
Go
please.
ahead.
And I want everybody to know that, I spoke to Ruben on this last week before, about the 67, because I try to reline and adjust the precincts. And then Ruben tells me, well, there's 67 people in that block.
Right.
And I said to you, that's a.
So we discovered this when we
Yeah.
were going through the maps together.
Yeah, and that's
a
what
week
brought it
ago.
up. And tonight is the first time that I had the opportunity to bring it up to everybody to say it's, I have a problem with it. That technically it wasn't addressed. But that's where and that's where it came from.
Okay, we're gonna have to end this meeting now and move on, because we got 2 meetings to go to. Thank you for your input, and I don't know where the heck we're going from here.
Good evening. Today is November